the fact you have it and use it to help you. So you can actually take on the power of the amygdala if you're aware of what is happening, if you see the triggers, if you sense the triggers. And what I'm going to do today is take you quickly through how it happens and how you can regress very quickly into this is transactional analysis, and what it's a picture of is you not being the adult anymore, being the child and responding in a childlike way, shivering, shaking, being nervous, being inadequate because you're simply a child when confronted with the adult. And what, of course, you need to be able to be excellent at doing is being the adult, responding to the adult who is necessarily assessing you. So how do we get to that wonderful situation? Daniel Goleman, and I recommend him as an author, I'm sure many of you have read his stuff already, has written absolutely extensively on this subject, and he puts it under these particular side headings. And I do have something I can give you at the end for you to take away and measure yourself, as far as your own emotional intelligence is concerned, if you haven't yet done it. But in the meanwhile, what I intended to do before passing over to the panelists for their take on it is to give you some examples from my background, which don't always reflect wholly well on me, but which give you an insight into what it's been like for me to transform myself from being a school teacher, a primary school teacher, into a business person running a company with a turnover in excess of £20 million and employing 160 staff out of 8 different business areas in the world. Well, I didn't mean to sound immodest. I'm just trying to point out the fact that although I am effectively a leader, I consider myself from the bottom up. I support my teams. And we have across the world something like 80 teams, each of them delivering a boutique service of delivery to top executives and also graduate entry people. And they do it by collaboration, 3 to 5 people maximum in every team. And I help them build teams, and I help them relate to each other as team members. And I help them empower themselves so that they feel adequate, sufficiently adequate to take these very important and powerful decisions about people's lives. We're not selling washing machines here. We're not selling white goods. We're running the chance of making a mistake. And if you make a mistake, it can be very life-damaging. Just going into the wrong job for 3 months can severely affect someone's self-esteem. So it's a responsibility we take very seriously, and everyone we employ has to have primarily as their driver a sense of carer. And then they have to be clever, and they have to want to learn how to be an excellent carer. So here we go. To start off with, I had to have passion to do what I was doing. I left teaching because I was going to be promoted to be a head teacher, and then you aren't teaching anymore. And I joined teaching because that's what I enjoy doing, getting down and dirty and helping people and being very practical. I don't like textbooks, I like doing it. And how did that passion translate itself? Well, I think from the word go, I was born in a very different environment to many of you. I was born in a weird place where the contraceptive pill came onto the marketplace, but it was only available to married women. At a time when you could smoke on aeroplanes and in tubes and on buses. You're laughing. And at a time when it just seemed to me that the world was a crazy place. And I was much loved when I was at primary school, by a dear little primary school, and a headmaster who said to me, Angela, with your sense of humour and personality, you'll go far. And when I read it at the bottom of a rather mediocre report, I felt very disappointed that was the best he could say about me. I seriously did, but of course I've been using that ever since in order to communicate with people. But of course it wasn't until Daniel Goleman came along that a sense of humour and personality had any kind of a brand. Up until that time, everything was IQ, IQ, IQ. And of course the IQ was only designed as a way of gauging whether or not American servicemen were fit to hold a rifle. If they knew which end they were pointing, then they could have one, and they had to score 100 for that. That's how the IQ test originated, which is quite bizarre when you think about it. Then it translates into HR departments and into everywhere else in the world where it's currently used. So that being the measure, it seemed like a very inadequate one, and Daniel Goleman came along and did his deed. As far as my passion was concerned, because I saw so many weird things in the world, I questioned them all. I particularly questioned something bad that happened to me when I was 21. My mother died. And in those days, there was no counselling or assistance given. And I nursed her at home till she died. It had a great impact on me, and it left me feeling very angry that this had happened to me when everyone else had a mum and dad to go home at holiday times. I was at university. I'd had to break my last term to nurse her at home. And why me, and why does that kind of thing happen in the world? And that's what drove me to go on to take a degree, because I wanted to understand the psychology of how I was feeling, which was pretty angry. There's a seat down here. So that being the case, I was at the age of, in my mid-20s, in a default mechanism in my mind. Everything that happened to me, I questioned. I questioned why, which at the time was quite testing for my teachers. But it became my biggest weapon when I went out to work, because of course there are so many daft things in the world that do need to be queried, and if you stop querying them, they go on happening. So that was my passion. And I was so pleased when I left teaching to find an opportunity of using my skills as a counsellor and mentor in the role of interviewer. And then when my company, the company owned by someone else, was taken over by a bunch of men who wanted to add up the figures and make me do so many interviews a week and send so many people out on an interview a week, whether they were right for the job or not, I had to say, hello, I'm sorry, I can't teach people to do the job badly when I know how to do it well and how it should be done. And that's what drove me to set up the company. And that was my passion. So that was a pretty big one to start off with. And I think it's also a wonderful indication of how things that happen to you can appear to be damaging and bad, but if it hadn't been for those things happening, I wouldn't have had the experience to be able to relate to people much older than myself who are going through bereavements and divorces and all the other things that life chucks at you. So at the age of 21, 22, I gained an insight which was unusual for a child of my age. So I was ahead of myself, behind myself with parenting, but ahead of myself with the other bits. So that was my source of passion, to do things well and to grow a company where everyone else did it very well too. And of course, it's not surprising that when I started up my own company, a lot of other women who've been working with me wanted to come and join me, because people much prefer to do things well than do them badly. So the company grew very quickly. But along the way, some very testing things happened for me. And resilience was the next thing I really needed to develop, because things happen which can be, as a leader, make you feel very vulnerable. A member of staff leaves you, and you think, oh no, what did I do wrong? Why do they leave me? The clients are fine, they're easy. They're easy. It's your staff, the people closest to you, who know you, and you think they like you, and then they leave you. What's happening here? And whenever anything like this happens, I taught myself to adopt a very positive attitude toward this. Look for the positive. What was happening here? I even spent what was then a fortune, £1,000, £1,000 on me to go off on a training to find out how to think in a positive way. I had no idea it was leadership, because it wasn't called that then, but that's what it was really. And so how could I think about people leaving in a positive way? Well, how wonderful that on the travelator, just like the one you have at the airport, on the travelator of my life, I had this wonderful person join me and stay with me and help me for so long until they stepped off onto another travelator, which was part of their personal development, and I'd help them along the way. And you know, this became very much reinforced very early on, because those same people who had left frequently joined a company, say in an HR position, and then rang me up and said, Angela, hi, here I am. I know how well you interview your people. Will you please supply us with staff? And so our own staff became our clients. And of course, they knew we didn't do shortcuts, so there was instant trust. We never had to prove that we weren't going to be doing things badly, because they'd been through the whole mill. They'd been told by me, there's a better way of doing things than that. Let me teach you how to do this thing better. So that was a huge plus. And it was something which was a very big learning, and I now watch our own team leaders when I'm training them go through hell when their best mates leave them. And I can teach them that same thing. Don't worry, they're just on their own travelator, and you've helped them. So that's just something to be very pleased and proud of. There they go. And then we have openness. Staying open to everything. Along the way, I've taken on a lot of pro bono work. I've worked in the prison service, not for the prisoners, but mentoring the governors, because of course the governors are in prison too. They can't leave prison any more than the inmates. And one of the governors I looked after, I remember, was in charge of food and hospitality. Food and hospitality in a prison. And he had the job of looking after his inmates. There are 2 seats down here. He had the job of looking after the inmates, which was just like running a hotel, except unlike this hotel, or the hotel you're staying in, every night everyone wanted to escape. Which was a challenge for him, a big challenge. And of course, they didn't have just one person in one luxurious bedroom. They had a lot of men in one bedroom and very tight conditions. So he was running a hellish hotel, a hotel from hell, I think, and he's still there doing it. And I really felt for him. A more difficult job, I suggest, than the job of the hotel manager here. So that kind of work, plus also, if you can't beat them, join them. And certainly in my day, not many women had degrees, and not many women were involved in organisations which were to do with men. So I applied for them. I got myself elected onto the Confederation of British Industry, an all-male stronghold which spent its entire time bombarding the British government with what business wants. And I fought my place there and was re-elected twice. And I didn't just sit on one committee, I sat on the one for the enormous multinational companies and also the small to medium-sized enterprises. And I represented them both, and I also represented education and the development of people for employment, because there wasn't anyone else there who was teacher trained. And there wasn't anyone else there who was actually doing the job. They'd all just gone through governmental type jobs. They didn't actually know what the real world out there was like, and what it's like trying to explain to an employer what a new examination system actually means, and what it means the child does or doesn't know as a result of someone playing around with the syllabus. So this is the kind of stuff I was doing. And I think it was quite revelatory for them, but it meant I was joining the boys. I wasn't fighting them, I was just being one of the boys, I was being one of the team, and I was helping them achieve their objectives because they wanted to have good people in their companies too. I also joined clubs, committees of clubs, particularly the one at the end of my road. I really wanted it to be a good one. I spent £9.5 million on the behalf of the club, making a lovely swimming pool, indoor tennis courts, lovely gymnasium, blah, blah, everything you could possibly want to have in your backyard. Why did I do that? I wanted my children to have access to it. And also, it was another way of joining the boys and getting to know more people, because my name was always up there in the reception saying, oh, she's on the committee. So it was a wonderful way of also getting the name of our company out. So that was the networking. And it wasn't networking by giving business cards and then forgetting what anyone looks like and wishing and thinking you'd never want to see them again anyway. It was really getting down and dirty, working and making a difference, so that people might argue with you and say, Angela, why do you want to know when we last asked for anyone to give another quotation on the wine price that we're selling